Well, the number of South Africans living in poverty has increased in the past 4 years since 2010. In its new report, Stats SA says 205 of the country's 20.5% rather of the population fell below the poverty line. According to the report, the nation's food poverty line translated to $2.34 or about 27 rand per person daily. Statistician General, that's Mr Pali Lehohla, joins us now from our Pretoria studios. Good afternoon, sir, and thank you for your time on the PM News Desk.
Good afternoon, listeners.
Poverty is not something that's unique to our country. Its eradication, of course, is a global challenge. And your new report is indeed a shift in methodology, meaning that although more people are now categorized as falling below this poverty line, it doesn't necessarily mean that poverty is getting worse, does it?
Well, I think what has happened is we rebased, and when you rebase on the basis of the new facts, you then recalculate that which you used to have. After that recalculation, it shows that more people are poorer than we thought before. But this is not a significant number at the food poverty line. But when you look at the upper bound line, the shift is quite significant. At the food poverty line, the shift is 20 to 21.5%, which is 1.5 percentage points compared to at the upper line where the shift is about 7 percentage points. So it's not that poverty has suddenly increased. The fact of the matter is, in the light of new facts generated by a rebasing exercise, even at the earlier date, there would have been more people poorer than we thought. The rebasing process is a statistical technique or a statistical necessity that gets implemented in all statistical theory. For instance, for the consumer price index, you rebase every 5 years so that the instrument measures in relation to new products. The gross domestic product, you rebase every 5 years the census, and the theory that you collect gets rebased every 10 years in the light of new facts.
Mr. Lehohla, now while the cost of living, of course, has gone up, South Africa, we're still faring much better than other countries. Can you give us the numbers here?
Well, I mean, the standard, the usual $1.25 that is associated with the MDGs in relation to South Africa is 2.43 cents. So it's about $1 and a few cents more than the standard that the MDG uses. And if that standard was about having poverty by 2015, certainly South Africa has halved that poverty. But we must also remember that when you use the standard of living in South Africa, it's a little bit more costlier than the standard of living in Egypt. Your dollar will carry you much further in Egypt than it would carry you in South Africa. In fact, talking about that, one of the things that has happened when we factor in the PPP measure, that is purchasing power parity measure, on a purchasing power parity basis, Egypt's economy is much bigger than that of South Africa. And on a purchasing power parity basis, Nigeria has an economy much bigger than South Africa. So if you look at purchasing power parity basis, South Africa is third, but second when you look at just nominal currency-based GDPs.
All right, you're using 3 lines of poverty, the food poverty line, FPL, and the lower poverty line. Take us through these lines and what they actually measure.
The poverty line, the food poverty line, actually looks at food, as the name suggests. It uses the number of calories that a human being would require just to live, just to manage to breathe. And those calories are 2,100. Based on that, quantity of calories. You could use one product such as sorghum beer. It would give you 2,100 calories easily. But people don't live on sorghum beer alone. They need protein, they need all kinds of things that they become whole. Now, it is on the basis of that variety of food products that you get the quantity of calorie, the amount of variety of proteins and so on in that food. And based on that, set of food products, the amount of money that you will require to acquire that quantity of calories with the variety of proteins and so on is 335 rands at the poverty line instead of 321 as we estimated previously. The second line. I'm listening.
You can continue, yes.
The second line, which is the one above the poverty line, which is just the lower bound poverty line, above the food line, is additional things that you require, such as clothing and transport and probably mobile phones. And that line is now at 501. And the upper bound line is 770 rands.
Mr. Lehohla, what is the significance of these findings? Are you hoping perhaps the new figures will serve as some sort of impetus for governments to perhaps increase social grants or increase taxes on the rich because they have been benefiting from cuts in personal taxes?
There are two reasons why we do what we do. We could have progressed the 321 rands, that is the poverty lines, just by consumer price index. When you do that, you do not take into account the composition of products that people buy. Now, we have to introduce the composition of products, and that is why we rebase. So in rebasing, we are closer to reality that people experience on the ground. So the first purpose is to measure as close to reality as possible. That is why we rebase. The second is to provide that accurate measure to policymakers to make decisions on a variety of policy measures that they have to take into account.
Thank you, sir. I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there. We are out of time. Moving on to other news.